So welcome back to TAR Institute. My name's Damien, and I've been leading this month's February Monday nights. So my topic is a couple of topics together, but one of them is that this idea that the secret is that there is no secret. And so I think we all strive and we have some wish to hear some secret method, some special path, quick path, hidden path, etc. But I think ultimately the real secret is that there is no secret, and that we can, from our own introspection and an analysis of our own life, we can start to see, in particular, the real value of love and compassion. And so the last 2 weeks, I've been talking about in the first week, talking about this idea that when somebody shows me real caring love and compassion, it's obvious to me how valuable it is, really obvious, and I welcome it. I welcome it absolutely, and I cherish that somebody, especially when I'm in really high emotional or physical, psychological need, that at those moments when somebody has shown me true affection and caring compassion, that just how precious that is, how valuable that is. But then for ourselves, we have a reluctance, a barrier, a block, a rationalisation against doing it. So for us to offer that real caring love and compassion to others, we find it maybe difficult, inconvenient. There's some reluctance, some hesitation, and maybe we even have ideas or reasons why we don't do it. And so there's a bit of a contradiction there between really how valuable it is when somebody is showing me caring compassion, when somebody is showing me patience, when somebody is showing me real generosity. And, especially in times of need, there's no question we see that as something very valuable. But so we all suffer this contradiction then when somebody asks us for help, or somebody is in a difficult situation, and we find there's a reluctance or a hesitation or a resentment even. So there's this sort of contradiction. So that's something to examine, and to really develop a belief that love and compassion is something extremely valuable, and not just when I receive it, but also when I have the opportunity to give it to others. So that's, the question that I've raised is, some people would say that love and compassion is automatic. So I'm saying that love and compassion is not necessarily automatic, that we have to have a reason to express love and compassion. And that's something to understand and then to work on in creating a reason. So we've started to look at what are the reasons why I would generate love and compassion. And I made the point last week that the stronger the reason that I have to generate love and compassion, then the more likely that I will generate and express love and compassion to others. But the weaker the reason that I have, the less convinced I am about the value of love and compassion, then the less likely I am to express it. So it's, sometimes I think people present that it's a given that we will automatically see the value of love and compassion. So I don't believe it's a given. I don't believe that it's sort of absolutely ingrained in our nature as a human to express love and compassion. There's no question that we have a disposition for love and compassion. But to say that we are all convinced of the value of love and compassion and that we are automatically engaged in it, that's not the case. We actually have to find a reason and develop a reason to really practice love and compassion. And so that's a little bit about what I've been talking about the last 2 weeks, is generating a really strong logic, a really strong intellectual basis as to why love and compassion is so valuable and so worthy of your effort to develop it. Okay? And tonight then, the question was raised, and there are people in this society and various people over history who have stated that they view compassion as a weakness. And you still see in the community today people who will happily state that compassion is a weakness and that other agendas are much more important than compassion. So these are things that we can examine. So for us, or for me, to really strive to see the value of love and compassion, and then on the basis of seeing the value of love and compassion, then I will generate love and compassion. Okay? So tonight we'll talk about another reason for generating love and compassion, and that is that love and compassion is actually a protector of myself. You know, love and compassion is something that actually protects me. So the logic here is along the lines that if I examine my mind, I will start to see that, for instance, hatred, the experience of hatred is for me actually a destructive experience. Within my actual mental experience and even my physical experience, when I am overcome with hatred, it is very damaging, both to my physical well-being and to my mental well-being. And so we can similarly with jealousy. You know, jealousy is also an emotion, from Buddhist terminology, a delusion or an affliction that causes me to, have very negative feelings towards somebody else's happiness or their beauty or their possessions, their wealth, their position, their qualities, their friends, whatever. So we have this sort of negative feeling towards that, and a resentment and a very unsatisfied experience when we see the beauty, the friends, the wealth or whatever of somebody else. And this can even be somebody who is the closest person to you in your life. So jealousy is not necessarily just towards an enemy, but even to somebody who's very close to you. You might despise their success or their happiness or their beauty or their well-being or something, their health, whatever. You might find that like somehow disturbing. So this is what jealousy does. And so again, we can see that my experience is itself a destructive or a negative experience within me. That experience is unsettling. It is harmful. It is harmful to me. So we can take a step back to the approach saying that, what really matters for me in my life is my physical well-being and my mental well-being. And if you start to think, what else is there? Well, really, my physical well-being and my mental well-being pretty much encapsulates everything that we aspire for. So we, in life, we have an ability where we see a connection between various external material things and my physical well-being. So we can easily see that good food, good medicines, comfort, like air conditioning in your lounge room, we can see that that is beneficial to me physically. Good drink, good food, medicine, care, good relationships with others, all these things are conducive to my physical well-being. But for us, it's more difficult to really see the cause and effect in our mental well-being. That's a lot more difficult for us to really understand where does my sense of happiness, where does my when I feel, for instance, frustrated or lonely or isolated or just for some reason out of the blue just unhappy, it's very hard for us to see what the cause and effect of those mental experiences are. So sometimes we might say, oh, that mental experience is because of this external condition. But the more that we examine, we see that the mental itself has a sort of a cause and effect going on just on the mental level. Very difficult for us to see that, but we can see quite clearly if the windows are open and there's a nice cool breeze in the room, I feel great. We have a very clear cause and effect perception. So the consequence of that is, we've got one which is difficult to see and one which is easy to see. So the consequence of that is that 100% we put all our effort into the external, the material and the physical as the cause of our happiness. And so for that reason then we might acquire a lot of property, we might have lots of relationships, we might try to get a high position, lots of people praising us, all these sort of external things, good clothes, good food, and so we sort of view the world, that the path to happiness is to have what I want and to not have what I don't want. So we see the whole process of happiness as a very material, concrete, physical cause and effect. So we pursue all this material and the physical. And we might be very convinced that that is the path to happiness and that it's 100% the path to happiness. Because the reality is it's very difficult for us to actually see the cause and effect circumstance mentally that we are experiencing as well. So we can then put our complete trust into this material path and then go all through life, striving for the material with the belief that this is the path to happiness, and then find that as life goes on, time goes on, that although we have everything, we have absolutely everything, good physical conditions, and in Australia you can pretty much say everybody has pretty good physical conditions, but the happiness that we were hoping would be the result of that is not forthcoming. It's not occurring. And so some people can come right through to the end of their life and even with everything feel that they have wasted their life somehow. Somehow I have wasted my life. That's the feeling that can happen. And so there's this thing to understand that, and you can't say it's a mistake, because to us, the one thing that we can see is this, if I open the window and let in the cool breeze, I'll be happy. And so we put this entire trust into the material or the physical or the external. But we are failing to understand this mental well-being and what is the cause and effect in our mental well-being. So we sort of live in hope. We live in hope that by striving for wealth, by striving for lots of companions, by striving for a nice house, a good car, a good job, high position, fame and glory, by striving for that, we are hoping that we will have mental happiness. And that's something to check, because if we look at it, we can see that the physical good things, the good material things, are almost unrelated to our mental happiness. You know, there is some connection, but that connection is quite secondary or tenuous. So we're not seeing the cause and effect in our mental well-being. So here I'm saying that love and compassion can work as our protector. So this is where we're starting to look at the mental cause and effect. So we need to examine, let's say, for instance, hatred. You know, if we think about hatred, and if we become convinced that the mere experience of hatred for me is destructive and it is actually mental unhappiness, that this is actually, you know, that experience of hatred is itself mental suffering. Because of that turmoil in your mind, that strong destructive attitude in your mind, that in itself is suffering. So we can then examine what can oppose that. What type of thinking can oppose that? So if we think about hatred, the mind of hatred does not stand on its own. So, and by this I mean the mind of hatred is related to an object which is perceived as very undesirable, as very not just annoying, but very harmful to me. I am perceiving this person, let's say it's a person, I'm perceiving this person as somebody totally disturbing, harmful, annoying, destructive to me. And so on that basis, seeing that person that way, on that basis, that gives rise to hatred. So when we start to think about working on the mental level, we can see that hatred and this person, there's this relationship. You know, we're not sure which comes first. We're not sure whether the person is definitely destructive and harmful towards me, and then as a result I generate hatred, or whether I have hatred and I generate that person into this enemy because of there's this sort of thing to examine as to whether which one comes first, or are they simultaneous, or, what's that relationship. But whatever the situation is, that the hatred that I feel is related to the way that I perceive that person. So we then, if we start to look at this as a mental exercise towards finding happiness, we think, I can change the object. I can change the object, or I can change my mind. So the perception of the object is that I am perceiving that person as this great enemy. And the mind that I'm perceiving that with is this mind of hatred. So we know from our own experience that the feeling of great love and affection towards somebody else is actually a happy experience. So we need to find a way to change our perception of the object and to change our emotion, our feeling towards that object. And so this is why we say that love and compassion is a protector, because if we think about the mind of compassion and the mind of love, in the case of the mind of love, there's somebody to whom we are affectionate. You know, we have a warmth and affectionate towards them, and we see that they lack happiness, and so we have this wish that they have happiness. And then for somebody towards whom we have affection and care, we see that they experience suffering, and we have the wish or the mind or the attitude that they be free of that suffering. That is compassion. So we can see that the mind of love and compassion similarly are produced in relation to an object. So here again we have a person, and we then have a mind. So that person we see with warm affection, warm, caring affection. And then when we examine that person, we find that they lack happiness and they are experiencing suffering. And so, based on our warm affection for them, we then generate love and compassion. So we can see that the two processes between hatred and between love and compassion are almost the same process. They both have an object perceived, and a way of perceiving the object, and then an emotion or a mental state which is generated in dependence on that perception. So if we start to really think and examine that method, we can see that any of our experience, jealousy, arrogance, superiority, love, affection, compassion, warmth, respect, dignity, competitiveness, we can see that all of these different things, both positive and negative, are working in the same manner. The object is perceived in a certain way, and then my mind is reacting to the way that I perceive the object, and so I am then generating hatred. I'm generating hatred on the basis that I see this person as very negative, very unattractive, unappealing, destructive, harmful. And on that basis, I generate hatred. So, this is why we say that a training, a belief, a dependence on love and compassion is a protector. Okay, so you can see that if I acclimatise or familiarise my mind to love and compassion, so that anybody that I see, I perceive through a mind of love and compassion. So even if that person is trying to harm me, I still view them through the mind of love and compassion. Then that love and compassion attitude, let's say perception, the perception that this person is lacking happiness and is suffering, and then finding some reason to have affectionate, loving kindness towards that person, then I will generate the mind of love and compassion. And the generation of that mind of love and compassion completely protects me from having hatred. Because you can see that the mind of hatred is the complete opposite to the mind of love and compassion in relation to that person. They are diametrically opposed, completely contradictory. And so the mind of hatred cannot abide in my experience if I have the mind of love and compassion. So for that reason then, that love and compassion is a real protector against all negative attitudes. Because similarly, the mind of love and compassion, in regard to somebody that we previously were jealous of, the mind of love and compassion becomes the basis that I can rejoice in the good fortune of somebody else. I can rejoice in the beauty or the education or the wealth or their position or their relationships. I can rejoice in it, and it can actually be a source of happiness for me because of that warm affection and loving kindness attitude or mind of love and compassion towards that person. So it actually is then a protector against hatred, against jealousy, against competitiveness, arrogance, superiority, pride, inflated pride, miserliness, all of those things that we've been talking about. Aloofness, feeling separate. Feeling separate to others is, you can oppose that by generating love and compassion. Feeling lonely, feeling depressed about, people around you or whatever. All of those things can be overcome by generating love and compassion. And so to understand that when we look at this model of the object and the mind that's generated is generated in dependence on the way I see that object. Independence on that. These things work together. So if I trust in love and compassion, I can transform that experience. I can transform the object, and I can transform my experience of the object. And so when we start to see that anger, hatred, inflated pride, arrogance, and all these things, that they're actually, those states of mind, they're actually destructive of my happiness. They're destructive of my happiness. And so then I can see that a path to mental happiness is for me to rely on love and compassion. And so here, this is why, people that sort of say, oh, compassion is a weakness, compassion's a weakness, you can see that if you start to think about this role, the role of this role of love and compassion, you can see that it's an absolute strength. It means that you have become totally self-determining about your own happiness. So the reliance on love and compassion means that you have this great strength to rely on love and compassion as a pathway to real happiness and satisfaction. And that if somebody rejects that as a path, then you know that it's just opening them up to suffering and depression, misery, unhappiness. So this is another aspect of love and compassion. This idea of really relying on love and compassion as a protector for myself, and seeing in any circumstance where I am angry, I'm jealous, I'm competitive, I'm upset at the success of somebody else, that sort of real feeling badly done by, resentment, all the rest of it, that we can start to see that love and compassion is a solution. It's a solution for us. So, but in this whole process, though, we have to understand, there is a need to understand the way that the mind works. So it's important to think about this relationship between the way we perceive something and then my experience of that perception. That these are all interrelated. The way I see somebody and then my emotional response to that person, that the the two of them are quite related. The emotion and the perception are connected. They're not independent. So, and to recognize that the freedom, the absolute freedom that we have, is that we can change the perception of the person, and we can change the way we experience that relationship. So we have this absolute freedom to change either. And so by training ourselves in love and compassion, by familiarising ourselves with love and compassion, and then using love and compassion to transform the way I perceive another person. So that's why last week talking about the remembering the kindness, and then generating the wish to repay the kindness. These remembering the kindness, generating the wish to repay the kindness, these are techniques. These are techniques for us to be convinced that affectionate, loving kindness towards another person is justified. You know, these are methods for us to justify to ourselves to have affection for anybody. Because at the moment, we don't do that. We don't have good reasoning to be affectionate to everybody. So we need to sort of work on generating reasons to actually be affectionate to everybody. Have loving kindness for everybody. And a great deal of Buddhist thought transformation is trying to give us reasons to be affectionate, have loving kindness for everybody. Not just your partner or your mother, your father or your neighbour or whatever, but everybody. And so we can see then that generating love and compassion towards everybody, coupled with a good reason to be affectionate to everybody, then is a real path to mental happiness. And really a big part of this is meditation. So meditation gives us the tools to become aware of this relationship of the object perceived and my experience of that perception, and to really start to understand how I am contributing to the perception of the object and to the emotion with which I perceive the object. That both of those things are actually in my control. But to see that, we require a lot of awareness, a lot of an ability to actually watch and understand our own thinking. So the qualities of this mindfulness and introspection that we can develop enable us to become aware of this relationship between how I see things and how I experience things. And so that's why we meditate. So let's do some meditation. And good to be alert. Meditation is not sleep, it's alertness, sharp, as much as we can generate a sharp and clear mind. A really sharp and clear mind. And we will just focus on the breath. And one way we can think of meditation is that it challenges the unwanted states of mind. It challenges the unwanted states of mind. So, as I was saying in the last few weeks, we're going to focus just on the breath. So just that mere breath coming in, coming out, the awareness, ideally the awareness of the breath coming in, going out. So it's just one object. So we're focusing on just one object and intentionally rejecting all distraction, all external sounds, memories, fantasies. We are rejecting. So for the period of the meditation, we are rejecting all the unwanted states of mind, and we are just focusing just on the breath. So become aware of your mind, where it is, bring it within yourself and let all of the various thoughts just fall away, and keep letting them fall away until your mind has like no thought. And then turn your attention on the breath, and with a very sharp and clear mind, keep the attention on the breath 100%. Just bring your concentration back to the room a little bit, and just examine what happened in your meditation. So always use honesty in relation to your own meditation. No point in deceiving yourself. So if you are sleeping or daydreaming, fantasizing, it's good to really recognize that. And so let's just repeat the same meditation. So this will be very short, and just have like 100% determination to focus on just the breath, 100%. So let's repeat the meditation. Just relax your concentration a little bit. So now we will, again, as in previous weeks, we'll just do a very short analytical meditation. So here tonight I've been talking about how love and compassion is a protector. Love and compassion is my protector. So just for a minute or two, try to go through the reasons and the examples of why love and compassion is actually your protector, and maybe even reflecting on incidents from your own life, and to see whether or not a mind of love and compassion would have helped you or protected you from unwanted mental states or suffering. So let's just spend 1 or 2 minutes on examining this question or this assertion that love and compassion is my protector. And then just bring your concentration back to the room. Yeah, so we have some time now for some discussion or questions or whatever anybody would like. Hey, Harry.
As a beginner, is it really important to do lots of breathing, kind of stabilising meditations all the time, or is it good to do a mix?
Yeah, so the question is, as a beginner, whether it's better to do a lot of the concentration, meditation, stabilising, or do you mean, or analytical? So actually the advice for beginners is actually to do more of analytical meditation. So the thing then is, how do you do that? So one way you can sort of treat that is like reading, reading and contemplating, like trying to understand, let's say like this example of the mind and the object, spending time to really understand that, and spending time to really understand, what's the essence of love and compassion in relation to the way we see others. What's the essence of hatred in the way that we see others? So they're all analytical meditations. So as a beginner, the important thing to develop is your understanding. And then gradually we then can develop our powers of concentration. But the actual recommendation is, in the beginning, although it seems like the reverse is what we often seem to present, but the recommendation is, in the beginning, is develop your understanding through analysing and really understanding. And so we should do that in conjunction with breathing meditation or whatever. So, for instance, a good practice might be to sit down and do, a couple of minutes or a minute or 2 minutes or whatever of breathing meditation to settle your mind, and then to read, and maybe even read something again and again until you understand it, or read something and then think about it. And that process, that is analytical meditation. Reading and thinking, contemplating that one topic to develop your understanding. So that combination is very useful.
That's supposed to be so we can familiarise ourselves with the method, so we can kind of just sit and then just go straight into contemplation.
So the question is about whether that's intended for sitting and contemplating more deeply. I would say all of this is for every moment of your life, is the way you interact with others, the way you deal with others. The aim of all of this is to benefit that, and to benefit me, and to benefit others. So not necessarily to sort of think about improving your meditation, but the goal of all of this is for a better life, for better life, a better me, a better me. Yeah.
What about the philosophy of being around those people that wish you well, as opposed to the reverse?
So the question is about being around those people who wish you well, rather than being around the people who don't wish you well. Is that the thing? So what is that philosophy? Is that the philosophy, is it?
Well, I was just reading about 12 rules for life.
Oh, okay.
And one of those is,
what's his name? Carnegie. What was it? Carnegie? Dale Carnegie, who said, I never met, he did say man, but let's say I never met a person I didn't like. And I always liked that statement. So, in the transformation of our attitude to others, we could perceive everybody as somebody wishing me well. So, so like last week, while you were sunning yourself up in Byron Bay, I talked about remembering the kindness, of perceiving the kindness of others, and remembering that kindness and generating the wish to repay that kindness. So to see that the perception of somebody else as not wishing you well, that is a perception that is related to the object you hold and the mind that you perceive that object with. So instead of thinking that it's some sort of absolute external truth, that there's this external person who completely does not wish me well, to try to understand that a lot of that whole labelling is to do with my perception and my view of that person. You know, so do you see the role? Let's say, I'll ask the question, do you see the role of your own perception in calling that person somebody who does not wish me well? Do you see that as a perception by yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
I must be wrong, but
No, so that's the first thing, is it a perception of yourself? You know, because this is a really important sort of thing, is that to move from thinking that there is something about that person totally existent from their own side, you know, to the recognition that it's your perception of them that you experience. You know, and that's why, you know, we do these sort of exercises of thinking, you know, that like in a relationship, in the morning, you know, you go off to work, your husband or your wife goes off to work. At your work, you know, in the morning you're really happy. You're viewing your partner as a pleasant person, you know. I didn't do too badly. They're okay, sort of pleasant person. And then you head off to work and you have a lot of difficulties in your work, and maybe you don't react well to them. You get yourself quite disturbed, and you come home and you find that everything that your partner's doing is really annoying you. And you think, what happened to them today? They have turned into such an annoying person. So this is the thing to understand, is the role of our own perception from the basis of the attitude that we are holding on to. And so as a result of that, I'm perceiving you as annoying. And I actually will say to other people, something happened to my wife, husband, friend, whatever today. They became really annoying last night, you know. So we have to understand that the role of my own perception and the conditions that generate that perception. So in this case, somebody who's had a difficult day at work has become agitated, anxious, whatever, you know, maybe you're under a lot of pressure, you know, understandably, their mood has become very damaged, and so their perceptions are damaged. So that's why love and compassion is a protection. Because if we can maintain an attitude of love and protection, love and compassion, it protects us from having faulty perceptions. So that's something really to examine and think about. So this sort of thing is, you know, 12 rules of life. Surround yourself with good people. Banish all the nasty people, the destructive people. Okay, there's some truth in that we should not associate with people who are destructive. But primarily, you know, even in Buddhism, you will hear that sort of statement. But that really means do not associate with the attitudes of destruction. You know, through others, through the influence of others. Do not acclimatise yourself, you know, to the attitude of racism or other biases or other hatreds, etc. You know, don't acclimatise through your friends. So, you know, there is an instruction not to associate with the non-virtuous friend. And that mainly means do not associate your state of mind with their state of mind. Don't acquire their state of mind. But so, you know, there is a good, you know, like coming here, being part of a Buddhist community or part of a meditation community or a group of people striving to be better people is a really good thing to do, because there is some support in that. But still, to understand perception, our perception of others comes from us, not so much from them. So again, to examine this relationship between the object or the other person and my attitude to them. So. Yeah.
So I guess the other way of looking at it is as a process of being able to go down through and moving through these blocks and see things could be for a lifetime.
Yeah, so the question is about trauma disposition. What do you say? Dislocation. Disassociation. And look, again, like last week, I talked about this concept that nobody misunderstands kindness. So not everybody is immediately equipped to really dig deep down in and analyse all of their thinking and all of that. So, because in that process, any of us that does that, we will see things in ourselves that we don't like. We will see things in ourselves that are destructive and hateful and suffering. So in a sense, there's an element of courage or of sort of an explorer mentality is required for that. But if we're not ready for that, then it's best not to do it just yet. But a key practice for all of us, whether we're doing that deep diving into our personalities and our previous actions and that, whether we're doing that or whether we're not, one of the key things to practice is to always remain happy. Is to have a technique that your state of mind always remains happy. So that again comes from being able to look at your thinking and to see the blockers, like you talk about the blocks and stuff. There's also sort of things in my personality that are blockers to my own happiness. And so to really cultivate a mentality of remaining happy. Right. And because that happiness is also a protection for yourself against falling into a very negative, traumatized state of mind or a very, unsupported state of mind. So, I'm not actually saying to you should deep dive into yourself. No, not necessarily. I think it's a very gradual process. So, but one of the protections we should all engage in is remaining happy. Have a happy state of mind and find out how to do that. So, and again, it comes down to recognise this relationship between the object and our perception and our thinking. That the unhappy state of mind is to do with an attitude and a perception of the object that's in our experience, and so our happiness is deteriorated because of that perception. And so if for instance that perception is resentment of others, let's say you were mistreated and you just carry a deep resentment all the time, at some point, irrespective of the rights and wrongs of your circumstance, that resentment needs to be overcome for the sake of your own happiness, and to find the way to do that. So sometimes we, out of a sense of righteousness, of being totally justified in our memory of being mistreated or whatever, we hold on to suffering when it's actually destructive of our own happiness. And so to really value happiness is important.
If we wake up in the morning feeling love and compassion for people, and we've been practicing that, and we go outside and we see a person, say, kicking a dog and really mistreating it, it's very hard to feel love and compassion for that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what's your question?
My question is, do we sort of force ourselves back into that feeling of love and compassion when you've had it, say, all day, and then when you see this incident, it's not?
Okay, let's just talk in general. Around the world at the moment, there's a whole heap of wars, starvation, genocide, slavery going on. So here I've been talking about protecting yourself from negative, destructive emotions such as hatred, right? So at some point we have to convince ourselves that despite the person kicking the dog, despite the slavery in the world, despite the destruction of the climate, of the fish, of the issues in Syria or Yemen or wherever, despite whatever is going on in the world, that for me, I must hold on to love and compassion every minute of the day. So whether it's somebody kicking a dog and you want to be angry at them and you want to say something to him or report him to the police and put him in prison or shoot him or whatever it is that you want to do, that the real challenge for us is to see that no matter what is going on in my life, I need to see the value of love and compassion and the protection that it gives me from hatred, from anger, from, resentment, arrogance, and, wanting to harm others. Let's say wanting to harm others. Love and compassion is a protection against that attitude. So the real challenge for us is, no matter what we see, to still hold on to the value of love and compassion.
So you can go and help that dog?
Well, let's imagine you had great love and compassion for the dog, would you do something? Yeah, of course you would. Of course you would. If you're able to. If you're able to do something, you would do it. So what I'm saying here is we have a choice. We have a choice between having love and compassion for the dog. Let's say in the superficial worldly analysis, we have the opportunity to have love and compassion for the dog and to do something for the dog. Or we have the opportunity to have hatred towards the person that is kicking the dog and then to express something out of hatred. In both cases, we might stop the dog being kicked. Do you see that? So, we don't necessarily have to react out of hatred. We can react out of love and compassion for the dog. And then secondly, certainly in a Buddhist point of view, we would also view that the consequence for that person mistreating the dog in the future is future suffering for that person through karma. And so out of love and compassion for the person kicking the dog, we may also stop him kicking the dog. But we do not have to necessarily have hatred as our motivator. So, and that's a challenge for us, because we are very habituated towards reacting with anger, with hatred, you know. And so we don't have the sort of real skill to understand how we can act in every circumstance out of love and compassion. It's getting a bit late, so let's finish with the meditation. So thanks for those questions. The questions are good because it does bring up maybe deeper aspects of the topic that are good for us to talk about. So thank you very much for the questions. And just to recognise that us all coming together and meditating and just thinking and discussing is something really rare and precious. And that takes the form of a ball of white light in the middle of the room. And then you bring it above yourself, the benefit of everybody meditating. Bring it above yourself and let it pour down into you through the crown of your head. And imagine that all of your physical problems are completely eliminated, and your body becomes filled with light, and your mind becomes really open and clear, you know, really expansive. And imagine all of that light gathers at your heart in the form of a white egg, an egg-shaped ball of light at your heart. And then thinking of everybody else here in the room, that they want happiness and they want to be free from suffering. Imagine rays of light go out to everybody else here in the room, or who were here, and bring them into a state of happiness and a state completely free of suffering. So all of their mental and physical problems and unhappinesses are completely eliminated, and they're brought into this state of great joy. And then to your family or those close to you, even people that have passed away, you can visualize them in front of you in the form of a human, and imagine that whatever suffering they're experiencing, whatever lack of happiness, is completely eliminated. And they're brought into a state of great happiness. And like this to every living being, imagine every living being in front of you, like a vast ocean of human beings sitting, facing towards you. And rays of light are going out right on, you know, to the end of the universe, finding every living being and bringing them happiness and bringing them freedom from suffering. And let the light come back and dissolve into you, and just have a great sense of delight and joy at even having visualized this. And just rest in that delight for a little while. So thank you very much. I'll be back next week, so I hope you can join in, and we'll continue talking about this all. So Great. So there's some tea and coffee and cake up in the dining room. And